Hi, my name is Anthony Carvelli. My partner is Jimmy Seaton. Today we'll be interviewing Sergeant William John Charles Northey of the U.S. Coast Guard, Air Force, and Air Force National Guard. He was in the military from 1945 to 1976. Today's date is January 14th. Okay. What is your full name?
William John Charles Northey, Senior.
Where and when were you born?
22 September 1927.
What was your pre-service education?
Right out of school.
Okay. Did you have a pre-service job? Did you do anything?
Well, yeah, I worked for my grandfather for a while on and off, you know, after school and weekends and stuff like that, but other than that, nothing. I was only 16, 17 years old.
When did you enter the service?
Coast Guard, 1945.
Okay.
Just before the end of the war.
Did you enlist or did you
No, I
draft?
enlisted.
How old were you when in?
17, just about going into 18.
How did your family and friends react to your enlisting?
Well, my father had to sign the papers. He wasn't happy about that, but he finally signed them. Excuse me.
When you went away to the Coast Guard, where did you go for basic training?
Manhattan Beach, Brooklyn, New York.
What were you trained for?
LCVP landing crash for the invasion of Japan.
What was that like? What was that? Was that scary to you at all that you were gonna?
No, we were all young kids, man. We were ready to go. We just couldn't wait to get over there. I'm glad we didn't. No.
During basic training, was it just as you expected it to be, or was it harder or easier?
Well, to a kid 18, 19, I don't think there was anybody over 20, up to 21 in our whole company in boot camp in the Coast Guard. So they couldn't hurt us. It was good. It straightened us up, I'll tell you that.
Were there any experiences there that left a strong impression on you?
Where, at boot camp?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few. We had a few guys that wanted to go outside with the girls because we were restricted. We couldn't go out for a couple of months. And they used to find ways to sneak out through the fence down on a blind spot on the base. Other than that, I never did. I didn't care about that. Didn't want to get in trouble.
What unit ship were you assigned to when you?
USS William M. Black, APA 135, troop transport.
And you went to Japan or Europe or?
No. Went to Calcutta, India. Through the Suez Canal, Mediterranean, down through the Suez Canal, the Indian Ocean, and up the Hooghly River. Well, we stopped in Ceylon, which is Bangladesh now, I guess. And then we were up there to pick up the troops in Calcutta. And these are the guys who were fighting in the jungles all during the war, and we were bringing them home. Well, a group of about a couple thousand. Excuse me.
What was that like, bringing them home?
It was memorable. To think that these guys were all up in the jungles fighting Japanese for 3 or 4 years. And of course they were real glad to get home. And it was quite an experience for a young kid, I'll tell you.
Were they like very relieved to see different faces and different people?
Well, yeah, they were real relieved when they saw that ship come in. Hey, we're going home, babe.
What did you do after World War II?
Well, I went to college for a while, and then I joined the Marine Reserve while I was going to college. Get some extra money under the GI Bill. And then I did a little work here and there and whatever. Nothing, you know, real important. And I worked for this brass company for a while. Then Korea broke out, and I went in 1950. I joined up.
When you were a young kid and World War II broke out, how did you feel about all that? Like,
I tried to join the Merchant Marine at 16. All the kids who were a little older, a couple, 3 years older than me, were all joining up. And then drafted, and some joined, some drafted, and because everybody was, you couldn't get fast enough down to the recruiting stations in those days.
Now, how was your like? What was the difference between your feelings like at the outbreak of Korea compared to World War II? Was it the same or was it different in any way?
Oh, no, it was quite different. I mean, we're for world survival on the Second World War, as far as I was concerned. It was a matter of survival too, really, in the Far East with Korea. That was gonna be a domino effect. If we lost Korea, then it was the whole Far East was gone.
You think so?
And then we'd have been, well, just about, probably close to what we're doing right now.
What made you decide to change branches from the Coast Guard to the Air Force?
Well, when the war was over, I wanted to go home. And I didn't plan to make a career out of it anyhow. That's what I came in for, and I got out. In those days, it was duration in 6 months, so I wasn't in that long. When the war was over, and that was 6 months later, I was out. And we had to wait until a lot of the people had been fighting during the war. They had to, you know, they had to muster out, so most of them were all gone by the time they let us go.
When you came back from World War II, were you did you ever think you were going to get back into the military or?
No, not really.
What were the major differences between the Coast Guard and the Air Force?
Well, there's quite a bit of difference because you're on board ship, and of course I had no rank, nothing but basically a Jeep. I mean, you know, a young kid, like I say, wasn't in that long. I ended up on a lifeboat station when my ship got decommissioned, and I was on Long Island there for a while waiting for discharge. So I used to run rescue boats on weekends instead of going home, stuff like that. And then I got out.
Did the training from the Coast Guard prepare you pretty well for the Air Force?
Oh yeah. The Air Force considered the boot camp we had in the Coast Guard adequate, and probably more than the Air Force. So I didn't have to take it. When I came in the Air Force in '50, I did not have to go to boot camp because I was already pre-service.
Yeah.
And they gave me one stripe, gave me a bunch of uniforms, gave me some money, and off we went. Then we went to tech school. I had to go to remote control turret school, and up in Denver, Colorado. So I spent some time up there.
So your duties during the Korean War was, what did you do?
Well, my flying took us just about a year was in training. Tech school, combat crew training, in-flight, crew coordination. We linked up at Randolph Field and we made a crew there, 11 of us. And then we went to survival school. And various phases of training anyhow. We ended up going to the 98th Bomb Wing over in Yokota, Japan. That's where we flew out of.
You were a gunner?
I was Central Fire Control gunner, right? I was a top gunner on the B-29.
Is that what you would have picked to be if you were, did you have your choice? Is that what you picked to be, or were you
No, I volunteered to, well, my qualifications were pretty good. And you had to, because I'm a little older than the rest of those guys. Those guys were younger than me, my other gunners. And the radio operator, they were only 18. This time now, I was about 22, 23 years old. And plus with my experience and being in the service, and I did have leadership abilities, naturally. So anyhow, I ended up as a Central Fire Control gunner. And I did good in gunnery schools, and all my marks were high, and so there was no problem.
What was it like during your flying missions over Korea? Like, what were your like during your first flight? How did you feel? And
Well, it's the first time I saw a flag. We were in formation these days. The first part, in 1951, that so August, September, somewhere around there. We were still flying day missions. And flak was pretty heavy. We saw planes go down ahead of us. Luckily, we didn't get hit. It was just puffing all around us. And luckily, it sounded like sand coming up against the aircraft. Luckily, we didn't get any real bad damage to knock us out on this mission, on the first ones. But You get a little nervous naturally. And especially if you see one of the forward aircraft in the formation go down, and then you say, ooh, who's next? So that was the first mission.
Did your crew work well under pressure, did you think?
Oh yeah, we were real good, except when we got shot down. Things all came out. I'll get into that, I guess, if you want to get into it now.
Questions for that later, that's fine. Were there any, like, certain stories or experiences that stick out in your mind about some of those missions? Anything?
Yeah. Well, one in particular, I thought we got hit one night. We were on what they call an interdiction mission. We were dropping 500 pounders. Ground controllers were telling us where to drop them. We didn't know what the targets were. They don't tell you. They give you a certain coordinate, drop somebody here, come here. Well, one night we dropped some, all of a sudden the whole sky lit up. We thought we were hit. We hit an ammo dump. And it actually was, I mean, this is a big one. The North Korean ammo dump. And the whole plane lit right up, and like everybody started hollering, wait, what happened? Oh, that was an ammo dump. I said, well, that's nice, it wasn't us anyhow.
What about daily life there in Korea? What did you do during your free time when you weren't
You don't
flying?
want to know. No, we had a lot of fun. We've associated with the local people, and they were real nice to us. We had a lot of Japanese people working on base too. They could speak some English. They were pretty good. And then we had what we call Fuso just outside of Yokota, Japan, and we used to get on there quite a bit. Because everybody went down there, so there was nothing there. We were in farm country up here. We were way up, north of Tokyo, about an hour by train.
What were the sites like there? Was it like the landscape and the...
Beautiful mountains. Yeah, we had a place called Mount Mataki we used to go to once in a while, and they had rail cars to get up to the top of it. It was a beautiful country over there. It was nice.
How was the food there?
Air crews ate well. We had fresh milk, we had fresh eggs, and steak, and all the best you could eat. Because we weren't well, we were happy anyhow. A lot of the other people weren't. Everybody ate pretty well, but we ate the best.
How about your supplies? Did your supplies match the enemy? Were they better or worse?
Supplies?
Yeah, were like your planes, your ammunition, your guns.
Well, the ammunition was from World War II, dug out of the sands on the islands, I guess, during the Second World War in the Pacific. And I had inferior gun barrels. We didn't have the good ones. They had training barrels in the plane. Our plane was just taken out of mothballs. It was brand new. And we used to have what they call stellite liners. Well, we didn't have. We had training barrels, which would have burned right out like that in combat. So I had to have those all replaced. But other than that, we were pretty proud. We had a brand new aircraft. And as far as anything else goes, we used to help the bomb loaders once in a while. I used to have to fuse the bombs in the bomb bay, take the parachute off, and then go outside there and pull the pins on the bombs. And Bombardier had to do it up forward.
What about like sleeping and living conditions? Were
Good. Yeah, good. We had a houseboy. Every room had a houseboy. So he cleaned up the room, and so we gave him a few yen every week or a month. I can't remember exactly. But no, the quarters were good. They weren't fancy, but they were nice. They were old Japanese army barracks. That's what we were sleeping in.
Well, did you feel any like animosity towards like the Japanese and them to you?
Never, never. Although we did take a hunting trip one time. We went to Mount Pataki. We drew out some M1 rifles because there was deer hunting up in there. So we took a train. We're on there training with the rifles, and some of these old Japs were in the army. They still were in their old uniforms and so on, and they glare over at us and said, "Boy, I'm glad we got these things on." But other than that, the average person was fantastic. They were good.
How did you feel when you learned of Truman's replacement of MacArthur?
I didn't personally care for it because we should have gone straight up. We wouldn't have had the trouble we've got right now, or had afterwards. But that's your politicians, and they think tanks up there figured it would be better not to, but we had the edge when we could have moved up, I think.
Were you ever captured?
No, close to it.
What do you mean by close to it?
Okay, bailed out, middle of the night, landed in my, in the water, pitch black, didn't know where I was. Well, I knew I was in between the mainland, it was in the Yellow Sea, and the island. Well, the aircraft hit the island, and I saw the big flame, that's how I knew which way to go. If I'd have gone the other way, I'd have been on mainland Korea. So anyhow, I had no, nobody to pick us up. They couldn't turn the lights on the island because it was enemy territory, and there'd have been a war right out there, shooting at each other, you know, across the area there. And I started to use my flares, which didn't go off. I had a .45 pistol with tracers. They didn't work, and if they did, I'd have been captured. Because I could hear a gunboat, you could hear it chug, chug, chugging, and I could hear these people, that's how close they were talking. And so then I was quiet, I didn't try to do anything more then. I said, that's it, you better sit cool and hope they don't come over here. Well, they didn't, and they were looking for me. So I paddled into where I saw the plane crash, you know, the big fire plume. And then I had to search it, because it was all cliffs. And I found one small spot where I could beach. And then there was a trail of rocks. It was rocky. It went, oh my God, that was more than about 45 degrees or more angle going up. And so I pulled the raft up, turned it over, because I wasn't sure what the story was. So they taught us in survival, turn it over, put the blue side over so it doesn't show yellow. You may have to evacuate the area. So I did all that, and then I started up the hill. And I heard this clunk, clunk, and I said, uh-oh, that's a machine gun. Well, there's a radar site, a radar operation just at the top of this ravine. And they were glaring down because they saw something down there. And finally I was falling all over rocks and everything else. I said, well, I said, I gotta do something here. I'm gonna bust myself up trying to get up here. So I had a little pen light, and I was cuffed it, try to get the lay of the land and then kill it. And somebody yelled up there, hey, what's going on down there? What are you doing? Who are you? I said, who are you? And I had my .45 out and I had a .32 automatic. And so I said, well, we're Americans. I said, well, you got another one here, buddy. Don't shoot. So anyhow, I got up to the top, and they were almost about ready to fire down. They had a big machine gun on a pedestal, a tripod. So anyhow, the next day, we had to go down and try to destroy the aircraft, what was left of the ECM or anything else. Well, when it hit, there wasn't anything left. And all the gunners, you couldn't even see, you couldn't even find the guns. I mean, this thing was, I mean, it disintegrated. So the ECM operator went down, we had hand grenades, and there was nothing to blow up. So we didn't have to worry about that, because the ECM was classified, even though it wasn't, it was worthless. Because when we got, I'll have to backtrack a little bit, before we got hit, we were sitting up in there, and I looked out, I said, boy, look at all those orange balloons over there. There was a barrage, flak from the ground, radar-controlled guns. And they were at our altitude, but they were way out. And the ECM operator said, one by one, he was blocking them off with his channels, and one by one, he says, well, there's another one, oh, there's another one, another radar-controlled gun. Well, then, he says, well, there's another one, and I can't block it. I just ran out a frequency channel. Boom, it walked right in. Engine 3 and 4 was shot out, had a hole that big between the flight engineer and the radio operator. That's when everybody went ape.
Panicked, everybody?
And then we went on our way down, with diagonal 45 degrees or more, I guess. And we're all standing up trying to button our parachutes. We had never jumped at that attitude. So the aircraft commander, luckily he had experience in Europe flying and whatever, so he was a cool head. And he leveled it off, he trimmed it up, so we were still going down. And then, then we had somebody, the radar control guys on the ground called in, so you had a German night, well, you had a night fighter on you, which was the old German Focke-Wulf that they didn't get into an operation during the Second World War in Europe. Anyhow, the Koreans and the Russians picked it up. So that's when I fired all my guns to the rear. I shot every gun on everybody. Turn your guns on and just empty them. And it was armor-piercing incendiary. It looked like a 4th of July. But it saved us probably because the guy was right on our butt. So I fired mine, the lower aft, and the tail gun right straight back. So he didn't come in. And then, basically, after that, we finally got over to Pyongyang-do. And then we had to get out because we're going down now. You got to go or else. So out we went. And we lost the pilot. It was Captain Bingham. I don't know anything. We never heard anything about him. He was probably out after me. And probably got captured or drowned. We never knew. Never found out. Our regular pilot was I don't know, probably mentioned that, or he was flu or something, congested, he couldn't fly.
Do you think the instinct took over after you were scared at first?
You what?
I mean, obviously.
All instinct.
The training.
My heart was going like this, I thought it was going to come out.
You think the training saved you, or was
yes. Every time you go on a flight, when you see these crews lined up, you go through all your emergency procedures. Over and over and over and over and over. So when you get into a situation like this, instinctively, that's it, you're operating, you're moving. You do it instinctively.
Was there anybody on the crew who did panic past relief? And
The
was
flight engineer and the radio operator, because naturally the place was on fire. They got engine 3 and 4 shot out right here. The flight engineer was here, radio operator is right behind the upper aft turret, right in here. I mean upper forward turret. And that's where it blew through and shot these, just blew these engines right out, and they blew a hole right through the side of these guys, and fire came in, and then they panicked for a while. Chooch was completely out of the radio operator because he was blind. The flight engineer had a little window. Of course, he saw the thing coming in, and then, of course, the poor radio operator, he's something behind, it's all dark, and all of a sudden the whole side of the aircraft comes in on him. So the aircraft commander, he quieted everybody down. He just quieted. He's a real religious man. He's a real nice guy. Fine person. Okay, Mac, take it easy. Calm down, Chooch. You know, everybody up front, because it was a little hectic. And now, of course, we're going down too, so on fire. So, well, when I did bail out, I looked in the bomb bay before they opened up the doors. They were all full of holes too, but they really nailed us good. The whole barrage came right in on us. So,
what was your purpose of that mission?
personally, I think we were guinea pigs because we were dropping paper. We had these tin bombs full of paper leaflets. Come to our side, the food's good, or whatever else they said. I don't know. I used to have some in the jacket, but I don't know if they're still there. My flight suit. But nobody else made that mission. They saved it for us. And of course, we found out what happened then. We got over there, and that was heavily fortified. All radar-controlled guns around. They wanted to find out just how fortified it was because it was also a MiG base. MiGs kept coming up out of there all the time during the day missions and whatever.
How many men made it back?
11 of us. We lost, like I said, the pilot.
Just the pilot.
Well, those days was pilot and co-pilot. Of course, it's aircraft commander and pilot now. But anyhow, it was actually it's co-pilot in those days. It wasn't the aircraft commander, the regular pilot.
Did you ever?
So we lost him, the replacement.
When you were in the water, did you think you weren't going to make it, or did you?
Never. I felt at ease. I was born in Rhode Island, brought up on the water, sailboats, and the whole 9 yards. No, I felt real good in the water.
Did the pilot have time to eject, or did he just have
Barely.
Barely.
He got pretty well cracked up because he couldn't tighten his button. He was the last one to leave. When he jumped, his parachute harness was all loose. Tore his legs up and everything. He got busted up pretty good. Then he hit the ground, and it's all rock and cliff over there too. So we're bouncing off all kinds of territory over there.
Do you want to get your flight suit?
Hmm?
Want to get your flight suit?
Sure.
Those are
Oh, this suit has been swimming in the Yellow Sea off Pyongyang Do. And it still has salt water all over it. And I will keep this thing forever. Can't even use the zippers anymore, but 1951.
always hold a special place right there.
Yeah,
It's been a while since that suit's been in action.
a long time. Yeah, I don't have any of those pamphlets in. I saved some. I don't know where the heck they went to, but whatever they said. But
Did you make any strong bonds with your comrades, and do you remember any particular people from Korea that left a lasting mark on your life?
well, we were all pretty close to brothers. And the aircraft commander, yes. I mean, he saved us. If it wasn't for his abilities and his coolness, well, we were doomed. And the rest of us, well, I don't know who's alive. Like I told you before, there's some of these people I don't know. They're all scattered all over.
How was the troops' morale over in Korea? Where was it?
Well, as far as the bomb wing, very good. Of course, we're over in Yokota, and the guys over in Korea, of course, naturally, they're getting bashed all the time, shot up and whatever, the ground troops. And of course, we had fighter aircraft over there too. But they were more like, more southern Korea. Basically, you might say we had it made until we had to go over the target. And the rest of the people, they were pretty good on base. We had the NCO club, Airmen's club, and whatever. Officers club, and of course, like I say, we lived good compared to the guys living over there in Korea.
How did the officers treat you up until Korea and through the Coast Guard and into the Air Force at that point?
Well, I thought they were good because naturally some of them were old enough to be our fathers. So when I was in the Coast Guard, and we didn't have any problems during Korea. I mean, they were good, real good. Your flight crews are real close anyhow. We all used to call each other by our first names until we got on base, when some officers would sort of balk at the fact that we were calling each other by our first names. But other than that, up in the air, that was it. No, we had good rapport with the officers. They wanted to get home too.
Who was the commanding officer that you had to report to?
Well, my aircraft commander, Don Clancy,
Um,
and then the bombardier. Basically, I was in charge of all the gunners and the guns. But the bombardier, basically, being that he was dropping bombs, and he also had the upper forward turret as a primary, he was also in the chain of command. It was the aircraft commander and then the bombardier. So if I wanted to have more ammunition, or I wanted to change my ammo load or whatever, I would let him know. And then we'd have to get with the flight engineer, depending on how much ammunition we could carry, depending on the bomb load. If it was a real heavy bomb load, then they wanted less ammunition. There's a lot of ammo up in there. There's 1,000 rounds per gun. And we're talking about 4, 8, 6, 8, 10, 12 guns.
Yeah, that's why we. Did your feelings of war change at all after Korea compared to what the USA went through during World War II?
No, not really. I figured it's something we had to do. They were our allies, and like I say, if we lost Korea, We could have lost the Far East.
So
And
that
there's democracy down the tubes, they were gonna tell them, we're gonna make, we're gonna help you be a democracy, and then we can't leave them sit there. And those guys were coming down, and they were planning to take over the Far East.
Some people have said that the Korean War is called the Forgotten War. How do you feel it was justified in going into it? What were your feelings?
Going into it, I thought it was justified, just like I said. And first of all, they call it a police action, which was a dirty word. There was no police action. That was war. Now they call it a war, but at first they didn't want to say it was war because of, I guess, the political ramifications about calling it a war, and I don't know, it's a bunch of junk anyhow. It was a war, as far as we were concerned. We were being shot at, and all those ground troops over there were getting mangled. It's a war, not an action.
What was it like when you came home from Korea? Any specific differences in the soldiers or the civilians when you returned home compared to World War II?
Well, we still had some people who didn't get over there, and as far as the people go, we didn't have any big parades. Like the Second World War, I was in a parade up in New York City with President Truman was on the reviewing stand just before we got sent out to sea. But after Korea, nothing. We were just lucky to get home. We felt good about getting home, but there was no big celebrations, except in the families and whatever. There was no big welcoming, none.
Did you feel that there should have been?
I would say so. Not so much for us. There's a lot of people got killed over there. A lot of ground troops. They froze to death. They got blasted. They got captured, mangled. And we lost a lot of air crews beside that. Yes, there should have been something.
Now, what did you do after the Korean War?
After the Korean War, I joined the Rhode Island Air National Guard. And we had F-84 jets at the time in Rhode Island. And of course, then I applied to go to radar school and electronic gun sights and whatever, because turrets we didn't have on 84s. So I had to cross-train. And then after a while, I got a job as an air technician full-time, so I was there working full-time every day, just like these guys do out here at Griffiths. I was working on electronics in the in aircraft.
Then the Air Force National Guard, was that just created then too? Or was that around for a while too?
It still is.
Yeah.
All these people out here are Air National Guard, right on the base right now.
Okay.
In fact, it's bigger than ever. Most of your reserve and air and National Guard right now are doing a lot of these missions are over in Iraq.
Yeah. Obviously, the military is a pretty big part of your life now. So now,
Well, it still is.
did you think after the Korean War that you were going to continue in it? Because you said after World War II you didn't think you were going to.
Well, I was only a young kid.
Yeah.
Who knows what? I was just out to have fun. First summer I was a beachcomber and I was enjoying myself. But other than that, no, I wasn't thinking about a career. And I wasn't thinking about it after Korea until I joined the Air Guard and found out that my career field was wide open. And I said, well, I didn't make a very good civilian anyhow, because all my friends had been married, they moved away. And it wasn't like going home again, so I said the heck with it, so I came back in. I joined the Guard, and then I applied for active duty later, and came back in the Air Force.
The air technician job that you took, what did you do there? What was that like?
We worked on radar and gun sights on the F-84s. And we also loaded guns and we towed targets. We did everything because we were full-time. And then when we had the weekend warriors come in on once a month, we had to try to train them because we were, like I say, we were full-time. So we had gunnery exercises during the year when the pilots, some of the pilots are airline pilots, and they take a week vacation and so on, and we'd fly gunnery missions. We'd load the targets, load the guns, and take care of the electronics.
So, what were the differences now between the B-29 you flew in Korea and now the what was it that you?
84.
The F-84 that you worked on.
Oh, you mean F-84?
Yeah. What were
Well, the
differences
B-29 is a
between-
bomber. It's also a prop job, it's prop driven, where the 84 was a jet. And an older one, that was one of the, well, that's one of the, well, it was, I don't know, the second jet we had, I guess, outside of the one that looked like a T-33, and then we had the F-86 jet came out after that. Oh, there's quite a difference. I mean, one's a bomber, one's a fighter.
Yeah.
And a jet against a reciprocal engine.
Did you like this job better than the gunner job?
Well, yeah, because now I'm home.
No bullets flying now.
Yeah, that's right.
How did you enjoy the years you spent during peace in between Korea and Vietnam? And what was it like to spend time with your friends and family after going through so much in war?
Well, like I say, I worked for the Guard, then I applied for active duty, and I came back in '56. Met this fine lady in Rhode Island, and I got married. And so I came back in '56, got stationed at Westover in Air Defense Command.
What do you think that lady that you married would have said if she had saw the same kid who was 18 and joined the Coast Guard going into World War II?
What would she say?
Yeah, does she still think it was the same William J.C. Northey, or?
Well, no, I did progress in age a little bit. And I, of course, a lot more experience and worldly.
So how did you change as a person when you came back home after Korea?
Well, it didn't change me any. I was the same, happy-go-lucky, have friends, and enjoy life, hunting, fishing, and swimming, and
do you think that war matured you in a way?
oh yeah. It sure did. Made you feel like there's a little bit more to life, and you're lucky to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people you associated with have met a real fine bunch of people doing both services.
How did you feel during the time leading up to and the breakout of the Vietnam War?
Well, we thought it was justified to start with. I did, I mean. So a bunch of us did, really, because I'm in Air Defense Command now. And then I ended up getting put on the 105 project with Tactical Air Command down at Nellis in Las Vegas. And I'm jumping ahead here. During the Cuban crisis, I was at Nellis, and we were on 24-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, 24-hour days, trying to get these planes in commission and loaded up with bombs, rockets, ammunition, and sent down to Florida. And then right after that, of course, this was over a period of time. I spent 4 years down, and then after that, I got shipped up to Goose Bay, Labrador. And I was allowed to take my family up. We flew up. In those days, as a lieutenant colonels, and senior masters and chief masters were allowed to bring their families concurrently with them. So I had my family up there for 2 years. Then I came back from there and went to, I was in division on the evaluation team in Duluth, Minnesota. And then from there I went to Long Island, Suffolk County Air Force Base down in Long Island. And that was Air Defense Command too. We had F-100s there, 101s I mean. And then I ended up in Loring on the 86s. I mean 106s, I'm sorry, 106s. And then I ended up down here at Griffiths.
From the progression, like in the presidents, from Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, how did you feel about their foreign policy, especially with like Johnson and Nixon during Vietnam?
Well, as far as the policy goes, I guess the Vietnam thing was, I guess it was justified to start with, and I think it just got out of hand. It just, it got out of control. And with Nixon, finally had to stop it. Well, I don't think we'd ever won over there anyhow. The odds were overwhelming. But we probably could have done a lot better. But the politicians got in there, I think, and there's a lot of scrambling around, and they shouldn't have happened, but it did. So later on, I thought it was a waste, and we should have gotten out of there long sooner. So, and of course, I was in the Air Force all during the Vietnam War. I was still active duty. I never got over there. I was stationed mostly Air Defense Command after that.
So what did you feel for the soldiers that were there? Going through war already, like how did you relate to them, or did you feel bad for them?
When though? During Vietnam?
Yeah.
Feel real bad. They were sent into a jungle, as far as I'm concerned, that even experts wouldn't visualize what could have happened in there with the type of fighting that they had to do. I don't know how you could even ever get prepared for that. From what I've seen on the documentaries and whatever, and talked to some of the guys who got back, it was a nightmare. A real nightmare. And I thought it was a shame to have to send a bunch of guys in like that with little or no training in most cases. And then all of a sudden you're in a situation, even the experienced would have a very difficult job coping with a lot of that stuff that was going on, and the way they were getting ambushed, and it was a horror story as far as I'm concerned.
Did that affect you in any way towards like how you did what you did during the Vietnam War? Did you feel that you should have got out?
I volunteered to go over there, but I couldn't get out of Air Defense Command. Because I had a bunch of friends of mine that they went from Tactical Air Command, and they went over as a group. I didn't want to go, if I was going, I didn't want to go as a replacement or something. So I said I'd like to go with a group, so I volunteered to go with a bunch of guys I was stationed with at Nellis on the 105, and I didn't get there anyhow.
How old were you during the time of Vietnam?
Let's see, that's my 30s and 40s. That was a long war.
During the Cold War, what was that like being in the military? Were you afraid of what was going to happen with the Soviet
During the
Union?
Cold War. During the Cold War, I was most of my time was in Air Defense Command, and now I was up in Goose Bay, Labrador. We were scrambling 3 or 4 times a day. The Russians were coming down the coast, all from up there, Greenland, Iceland, up through that area. The Russian bombers. They weren't doing any harm, but they were just making sure that we knew where they were up there. And we scrambled quite often. And well, we've got pictures of them waving to the Russians. Our pilots on 106s were waving to the Russians. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, 102s. 102s.
The Cuban Missile Crisis, was that a pretty tense time to be in the military?
Very. 12, we didn't know, that was almost World War III. And it's a wonder we didn't sink Florida with the stuff that we sent down there, and it came from all the bases, not just ours. And we had F-100s, 86s, and 105s, brand new 105s right out of the factory. We loaded them all up and sent them out, and all the other bases, they were all sent down to Homestead and these various places in Florida, and to attack Cuba. So that was very, very tense. We were all uptight because if it had happened, And they had those atomic missiles down there firing at us, and close, we could have, it would have been a real disaster.
Did you think Kennedy did the right thing by sticking
Yeah,
staying
yeah. I liked him, even if he was a Democrat. I voted for him too.
How do you think Vietnam stacked up against World War II and Korea? I mean, I know World War II was the clash of the whole world, so I mean we had to go into that. But compared to Korea more, do you think that it was needed just as much as Korea was? Because I know it was for like the same types of reasons that we went in, but
Well, it was more critical that we went in the Second World War, that's for sure. Vietnam was necessary for a while, same as Korea. And we could have done better in Korea, but we didn't, so that's another story. That's politics and policy, so. And the Second World War was definitely, that was a must, or the war would have been gone.
Had the most reason to fight.
More reason, right? That was the salvation of the world, really. And the Germans, at that time, they had rockets, missiles that weren't quite developed yet. And then they also had some jets that weren't in production, which would have done a real bad situation for us.
what about Hitler? How did you feel about him as a young kid? Did you know a lot about him, or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I watched the news and the history that they used to show on the television and whatever, or the radio, I should say. And no, we didn't like him. He was not our favorite person.
During your time in the military, did you perform any unusual services or duties?
Yeah, I did a lot of them, but when I went to Strategic Air Command Survival School, I applied for that later on, because I was classified as an escapant of AD. In other words, I escaped the Army. And anybody who was either a prisoner of war or an escaping of AD could apply, and they would take you out of any command and put you in the school if you wanted to go. Well, I went in as the intelligence group. I was an interrogator. Mm-hmm. And I also chased troops all over the hills up in northern Nevada. These air crews would come in for survival training. Mm-hmm. And if we captured them, then we had people who were captured in Europe. And they would apply all the latest techniques that they knew of when they were captured. So these guys, if they got captured, they got pretty well beat up. Not bad, I mean, nothing. Yeah, but I mean, after spending about 3 weeks hiking through mountains with not much food or anything else, and then to get captured and then thrown in a hole and somebody put a pan over your head and pound on it, and all kinds of things to get them all stirred up. Mm-hmm. You try to simulate what would happen if they got captured during combat.
What did you offer after having gone through what you did over in the LSC over Huanging?
Well, like I say, I helped out the guys that had the experience with the prison of war, and like I say, what I did was help interrogate. Also, I used to drive a jeep and a weapons carrier through the mountains, trying to chase these people down to try to capture them. And we had these little 22 Hornet rifles, blanks. So if we came up on a group, you're captured. If they started to run, well, we start to shoot the blanks. And if they wanted to keep running, sometimes they did. Oh, we can't capture them anyhow. So I said, well, they weren't supposed to. Once they got caught, they were supposed to come in and go through the interrogation. So that's what I did there. That was unusual. I really didn't like it in some cases because the guys who were prisoners of war in Europe, they poured it on pretty good. And I felt sorry for some of these poor guys, because I went through survival school myself one time before we went over, and you're pretty well shot by about a couple, 3 weeks in those mountains up there. Hiking, night missions and whatever, you know, and then they get captured and then get, you might say, lightly tortured. So I said, I think I better get back on flying status. So I went back down to Davis Mountain Air Force Base and got to be a gunnery evaluator.
Were there any memorable sights that you remember from being overseas that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, during Korea, well, let's go back to the Second World War. I don't know if I mentioned that part about when we came into New York Harbor.
Okay.
And the whole ship listed toward the Statue of Liberty. And I was really impressed, and I felt proud. That ship was over like this. These guys are all screaming and hollering, and the fireboats in New York Harbor were shooting water fountains all over, the horns blowing and everything else. It was quite a sight. Yeah, I felt real good about that one. That was memorable.
Made you proud to be an American, huh?
Yep, you got it.
Did you receive any decorations, medals, or commendations throughout your military career?
Yeah, I got a couple right there.
Would you like to tell us about some of these?
Well, okay, the first one here, that's the European, Middle Eastern, Second World War. The other one is the American Theater, Second World War. The other one's the Second World War Victory Medal.
That must be a fun one to look back on. This one?
And that one is the Korean Service Medal. The other one's the United Nations Service Medal.
And that one was just given to everybody that was in Korea by the United Nations, or? Okay. This.
And that is the one, the new one that the Korean government sent over to us, and that's a beautiful citation. It's quite a write-up they gave along with it. I was really proud to get that one. And the other one is the
Efficiency, fidelity, and honor.
yeah, that's good conduct, Air Force. This is the Army Good Conduct. I got it in 1956 because, no, it was way before that. 1952, I guess it was, somewhere around there, 53, because we didn't have an Air Force Commendation Medal. We're still using some of the Army. So that was one of the last Army medals. Then we went into the Air Force Commendation, and then we have the Air Medal representing 10 combat missions.
This one must mean a lot to you.
Yeah.
Getting through that was pretty hectic. And then this one's
Yeah, and that is the Air Force Commendation Medal. I think, as I remember, I think that one I got because of all my service, and I don't know, I'd have to read the citation of it. But, because I spent 26 years active, and 26 years active, and then overall with the reserve time was 28 years. Yeah, I spent a lot of time, spread myself around.
So being in the military as long as you were, what do you think the military offers to young Americans?
Well, a lot of good opportunities, not just for education alone, but to take pride in your country, meet other people of different origins and whatever, and if you get overseas, well, you get a chance to see other cultures and whatever. But to me, it was to be proud to be an American. The fact is, you're doing something for your country, and of course, a lot of people over here now, not just the kids, that they're not that patriotic, some of them. And they get these weird ideas of changing the laws and the doing away with the Pledge of Allegiance and all of this other. That takes the pride of the country away. But to join the service, I would highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Something you'll never forget. If you don't want to make a career, you don't have to.
Well, we have a few more questions left, and we have only 4 minutes left on the video, so we'll take a quick
We're
break.
gonna take a nice little break.
Oh.
Do you think that our government during modern day foreign diplomacy has improved or gotten worse from when you were in the military?
Well, I can say it's different. Over the years after the Second World War and so on, I think the diplomacy was not too good in a lot of cases, because sometimes we backed some of these dictators, and the next thing you know, we're fighting them, they're our enemies. I mean, come on, and then a lot of people get this around the world. Hey, whose side are you on? We don't know who we're friends with one day from the next. And that part of diplomacy is not good. And this is why I think personally that a lot of people, countries, are a little hesitant to find out, just where they're going with us.
Is there anything here on the table that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, we can start off with my ship. That was a General Black.
That was the one you brought people from India and
Right,
Burma
that's
back
1945. And let's see, you don't want that, I guess, but
See you in the color guard.
well, there's another picture of me, and that was Coast Guard World War II. I was a young lad there. And that's another picture. I got a citation from the Legion for being 12 years color guard commander, which I still am. I went back into it again. I quit for a while. Of course, that's...
Back in the color guard. What about your flag over here? Anything you'd like to tell us about the flag?
Well, now this I bought in Calcutta, India. This is what the flight crews of our pilots anyhow used to wear on their jackets. It's China, India, Burma insignia.
How about that one?
And this one
This
is
I'll hold up one side.
This is a Squadron insignia. Why not?
Yeah, we're done.
500-pound bomb, an owl, a cocktail glass in his hand, a finger up like this, and an iron scarf, and a pistol on the side. We were allowed to carry pistols.
Just to make sure we know, that's a middle finger, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was a Squadron insignia. In fact, I got a patch on my old flying jacket. This is the B-29. We got shot down up here in Nampsey Airfield, and we finally, after they got stabilized and were able to bail out, because we were going almost straight down, and we bailed out over here off the coast on an island of Pyongyang Do.
What about these pictures right there?
Or you
No.
and the crew? You and the crew, yeah.
This one is at Randolph Combat Crew Training. That's our original flight crew. That's what we went into combat with. We were forming crews down there at Randolph at the time. And like I say, I don't know who's left. And here is me on a hard stand with 500-pound bombs underneath, and there's me in my top position in flight.
Okay.
Okay, now, these were captured from a North Korean officer, I don't know. One of the troops on the island of Pyongyang gave these to me, and I don't know what rank they were or anything else. They said it was supposed to have been a North Korean officer, anyhow. And this pack here was a barter kit, what they call, and you go over there, you can get enemy territory, or anybody that's trying to help you. You had a watch, and there was a few other little trinkets in there, and then there was also a little compass in case you got captured. And you might call it a little rectal compass. And then we had you talk, me talk, Korean and Chinese bulletins in here. And so you could, if you, well, of course they don't speak English, so you're trying to converse with these folks. And there was also a pack of morphine in here. This thing was sealed up and had a regular seal on it. And these had to be turned in after every flight, because if somebody got a hold of the morphine, well, they didn't want us to be taking morphine anyhow. So we had to turn those in. Here's a pack of maps. Now this is before the Chinese started south. These, the Second World War, people who fought the war in South Pacific carried these. And these are out of the map of China. Well, we sure didn't want to go to China during the period we got shot down, because the Chinese had already started south. They'd already joined the war. So there's a U-Talkie book, and that's a Korean phase book, and some more different maps of the area there. And then these were the Second World War maps. They were all of China, Korea, and that whole territory, in case you did get shot down and you landed in these areas, then they go for help. But these were not paper. They were all plastic.
In case you landed
These
in
are
the water.
Army Air Force cloth chart. It's got all that area over in Korea and China. And like I say, they issued them to us, but like I say, when we got issued, we weren't fighting with the Chinese at the time. So that would have been interesting to go to China. That'd probably be still there. So there's no sense in opening all these up, because probably wouldn't get them any, it wouldn't make any difference. But they're maps of that whole area over there.
Is that your flight record right there?
And there's my flight record. There's some local flights on here. I had a friend of mine in the Aussie room that said that these are going to go on the record. He said they'll never take pictures of them. How would you like your flight record? He said, because they'd be lost anyhow. I said, yes. That's how I got them. Took them out of my records, and I've had them ever since.
Oh, wow.
And these are my missions there.
Let's see if we can get the bailed out.
That would be
The last page.
right there. Bailed out over Poingandu.
And I got it.
See, the mission was NAMC, and that's where we got shot at. Radar controlled guns. Russians, obviously.
What are radar? How do those work? Radar controlled guns.
Okay, your guns are tied to the radar. In other words, I'm not positive just the circuitry so much, but anyhow, you pick up the radar, a signature on the radar, and it goes to the drive units of the guns. So the guns follow the radar target that you lock onto. So you lock on a target up here, the gun locks onto it. And like I say, when we got hit, I saw the barrage coming in from the right wing. It was way out, and then when the ECM wouldn't eliminate it anymore, any of the other batteries down there, they had a lot of batteries. Then they walked in and we got it, and down we went, 3 and 4 shot right out, holes all over the place. And, but that's how the radar controlled guns work. Now, if you got ECM, and you can hit their frequency, you can block them off, like I say, we were to start with, because that's where we saw the barrage way off, like the yellow balloons and our engine, whatever, going off way out. But when we can't block that frequency anymore, then the guns now just swing right over and lock right onto us. And that's all she wrote.
Yeah. How would you like to be remembered for your long and illustrious military career?
Well, I did my duty, and I helped a lot of people out who were later on under my supervision. As far as being remembered, a veteran who tried to do a good job. He spent most of his young life in there. And the only reason I kept going in, because that's the way we were brought up in the old days. You're patriotic. If you go to war, your country's in trouble, man. Everybody's down there. They want to get in and stop this stuff. And so I just feel that, like a lot of other millions of other GIs, that hey, we did a job. Felt proud of it. Proud of what I did. And to be remembered, sure, I was a veteran. Why not? Never forget that one.
What did you do after the military?
Okay, after the military, I retired out here at Griffiths Air Force Base in 1976. And I worked in air refueling, well, not air refueling, I worked in refueling section for a while. And then I got a job on Star Hill as a radar operator. There was a height finder up there, so I worked up there for a couple of years, and then I ended up down, and I didn't like it. I had a friend of mine who was an engineer who got me a job in RADC as a electronic technician. And I spent 11 years over there in civil service. And then I got out of civil service, and then I ended up working for PAR for about another year. And then finally, I was attached to a satellite tracking unit. This is an RADC, division I should say. And they abolished the mission anyhow, and people were sent to other different sections and divisions or whatever, and I said, I think I had enough of federal employment. So I said, that's it, I'm retiring, period.
Do you still keep in touch with the friends you served with, and are you affiliated with any veterans organizations?
Friends, local, guys I was stationed with out here, but as far as my flight crew, no. I don't even know who's around anymore, and I know some of them are outgoing. But I have a lot of friends here that I was stationed with. And veterans organizations, I am a life member of the VFW, a life member of the Lee Legion, and a life member of the Disabled American Vets Syndrome.
What has life been like for you since you were discharged in 1976? Is there any times during the day that you think back to a sight, person, or experience from your time in the military and overseas?
Well, yes, I would never forget Don Clancy, our aircraft commander, for what he did. That will always stick with me. And with his expertise and his experience and the fact that he was cool, he saved us, because we were going down straight in. And he cooled the crew down up in the front, because that's where most of the action was. They just blew up. You know, they got shot up pretty good up there. And that is memorable to me. I'll never forget. Never forget that man. And then he used to sing in the choir on the base with the Japanese church choirs, and so he used to get us to church once in a while. If he was singing, we were there. And praying going down, it paid.
In your opinion, how has the military changed from, not from a technological aspect, but a more mental and emotional one? How are the soldiers nowadays different from how you were back when you went in?
I really can't say too much on that. The only ones I associate with it, because we got NEADS people out here on the base, and some of them are in our color guard, and the NEADS commander he belongs to our Legion also, and that's the only thing I could dwell on as far as, local troops. Some of these people had active duty, and some are just, regular active Air National Guard.
Well then, during...
And as far as their attitude's good, I mean, they're working full-time here, and they're going for a cause.
What about from 1945 when you went into 1976 when you went out? What was the changes from that period of time then?
Numerous. Of course, naturally, different commands and different aircraft, and then I was on board a ship, and it was radical changes. I mean, of course, as I grew up in rank and I got more responsibilities too later on in the Air Force, I mean, it's quite a change. And then during the Cold War, the Vietnam War, and Cuban crisis, and everything else that was flying around, it's hard to pinpoint on that one.
Has the Star Spangled Banner or Pledge of Allegiance changed after your experiences?
It better not. We're fighting for that right now. And that's what I say about the people take more pride in their country, and the people who preserved it ever since Washington and all the way up through. Cost a lot of lives, and freedom is not free. And that's for sure.
How were you affected by the acts of September 11th and the war in Iraq?
Well, I felt kind of helpless. I felt like I should have been somewhere, and what are we going to get into after this, because that's an active war. And I know a lot of other guys that I've stationed with the retired Air Force around here, and they would, geez, what can we do? Can we get into something and help out or whatever? Because we didn't know what was happening. It was traumatic, let's put it that way, and tragic, naturally. And personally, I think that George Bush did a good thing by going in there, because we watched Hitler go through and take over Europe. Nobody did anything. And we watched Stalin, we watched Mussolini, and nobody did anything. This guy stood up to the plate, and he did something, and we deserve to be in there. We got to fight terrorism. And we already had a taste of it already over here. And there's no sense in backing away, and these other politicians and these other, I could call them something, but they're trying to run it down. We shouldn't be there. We don't go for it, whatever. If it wasn't there, you let them go on, and next thing you know, they're here. They already showed that they can get here, and we already know that they have a lot of cells over here. And it's a shame we're losing a few troops over there, but this is war. You might say it's the Third World War. Because basically that's what it is. They have declared war. The abstract Muslims, I'm not running down Muslims, but the radicals and all other kinds of, I don't know what else is running in there. They just want to destroy everything over there and take it over. And they sure have it against us.
What about North Korea now? How do you feel about them?
I wouldn't trust them. They said they were going to do away with a nuclear plant. Anybody that's building has a nuclear plant is going to have access to making weapons. They already have atomic weapons, and they already said they have a couple of missiles already. I mean, what more do we want? And now we're sending tons of food over to them. Well, that's good. Now we're going to feed all the people. And they can still do anything they want. We're not up there. We can't get across the 38th. So how do we know what they're doing up there? And I guess from what I hear, a little bit, that there's possibility they have a few missiles, a couple that could reach California now, on this coast. I mean, not California, not on the west coast. So, I mean, you can't put your back up and say, or turn your head and say, well, hooray for us, and we're going to send them food, and that's going to solve the problem. That's not going to solve anything. They probably figure, well, if they get hungry enough, they'll attack. If they're going to attack, they're going to attack anyhow, as far as I'm concerned. Only now we're going to feed them.
If you could have been in one of the United Nations meetings when they were discussing about going to the war in Iraq, what would you have said to those countries that called us a bully and said that we didn't have the moral ground to do that?
You don't want to hear it. No, I just said a whole lot.
Do you think feeding them is kind of an act of trying to slow them down in their process of actually trying to go to war?
You mean the United Nations?
No, the U.S. back to Korea. The U.S., us giving them food. Do you think we want that to help stall? Because we're already fighting Afghanistan,
well,
Iraq.
I guess the feeling is that if the people are fed, they're not starving, then maybe they'll sit tight for a while. But that's, to me, is a stall anyhow. You hit that right. I think that's all it's going to do.
Yeah.
If you could teach young Americans one thing about life after all you have seen and gone through, what would it be?
Well, be patriotic. Try to help out the government where you can, and have respect for your country, the laws, the people, and basically the parents. Because a lot of kids don't have any respect for the parents anymore. And some of them don't have respect for anything. And I guess respect would play a big part in this area. In patriotism, because because I'm watching a lot of parades over the years, and I'm still marching. And we watch like a hawk. God, sometimes these police on the roads don't even take that salute. And some people don't put their hands over their heart, or show any respect for the flags going by. And that's not too good. Excuse me. But respect for younger generation. They gotta have respect and responsibility. We gotta be. The biggest thing is responsibility. Not the biggest, but a lot of it, and that's for younger and older. Because these days it seems like if somebody does something wrong, oh Jesus, that's an excuse. Or something else caused me to do that, or somebody else's fault. Don't take responsibility for your own actions. There's a big thing right there. So.
What has all of this meant to you?
All of
this.
a lot of memories, a lot of good ones, and I feel proud to have done what I have. I feel real proud of it. I've met some fine people, and not only that, I'm glad to be here, still around. And I don't know what more I could say, and this is why I like to stay with the veterans organizations. And I still march with a color guard. People say, well, why do you still? I said, if I can walk, I can march. Because I'm in charge of the troops so far. And of course, I'm Sergeant of Arms at the Lead Legion and color guard commander. Now, if I can't muster myself to do the long parades anymore, then I can designate somebody else, and I'll still be Sergeant of Arms. I'll put somebody else in charge as the color guard commander. But right now, I'm doing it.
Are there any last words you'd like to make?
Yeah, this has been a real pleasure. In fact, I consider it an honor, really, because it's nice to get out and let people know that some of us are still around.
Oh, trust us.
And we're going down the tubes. We've had 6 funerals since the first of the year so far that we go to. Because we have a ceremony in the Legion. And then if they request a military funeral, we try to do it ourselves. And if the weather's right, we do a firing squad in the whole 9 yards. And the year before last, we went to 22 funeral homes. Yeah, that's a lot of people. Now we're taking in the Second World War and Korea. Korea's getting up there now. And Vietnam. So time's marching on. We're losing most of it. And we had the Legion Convention down in Smith Post in Rome. And it was amazing. I couldn't believe it, because we have a regular solemn ceremony reading off the names of the people in the county who have passed away, and it's unreal. 4 pages of names in the last year in this county. And you know, it's sad. So I feel proud to get in here and do what I can, and so do the rest of the folks that we have in the color guard. And we're real proud to do what we're doing, do anything we could.
Thank you for coming here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.